Here. All right, recording is now in progress. Thank you. Very good. Thanks, Terry. I'm Jay Ignis. I'm one of the pastors at Messiah Lutheran Church in Yorba Linda, and I have had the honor and the privilege of being on the resolutions committee for I don't know how many years. I no longer know. And this year I am serving as the chair of the resolutions committee. If you see page 6.1, I'm going to try to start with 6.2. I'm not sharing this yet. Hang on. Where did it go? Down there. Share. Yes. All right. It says that now I'm screen sharing. This is one of my goals in life, was to figure out how to do this. Back 4 or 5 years ago when we were trying to figure out how to live. You'll see on page 6.2, there's a description of what the resolutions committee does. We are not in charge of anything that decides the ultimate fate of any resolution, whether it is approved or not. Our job is to make sure that any resolution that gets to the floor of the Synod Assembly is in a form that is compatible both with our corporate documents and with Robert's Rules of Order. By the way, in the budget hearing, our treasurer suggested that if you have insomnia, you could read our audit report. I would also suggest you could read Robert's Rules of Order if you just need to if you need to get a nap in. Our job is to get them in shape so that they are proper for action. And that both has to do with form and with the fact that, for example, because in our denomination we have 3 separate forms. I'm searching here for the right word. We have 3 separate expressions of the church: the congregations, the synods, and church-wide. And while they are all church, with few exceptions, we can't tell each other what to do. So if you were to submit a resolution that said, for example, tell church-wide to do this, or tell congregations they have to do this, that would not be consistent with our corporate structure in our documents. There is a difference between a resolution and a memorial. You'll notice that we have a couple of memorials in our package this year. A resolution, as it happens in the form of in the context of a Synod Assembly, is a direction to Synod staff or a request to congregations to take certain kinds of actions. A memorial is a request from the Synod Assembly to the church-wide assembly to take some particular kind of action. I think we've had years in the past, and I should recognize Jeff Kors, who's our synodical vice president, and Pastor Laura Zeal, who this year made up the rest of our committee. Thank Terry for getting this thing off the ground and on her second hearing of the day already. So thank you for organizing all of that. I think in the past, we've had at least one assembly where we voted electronically. I don't remember when that was. I'm sure Pastor Laura does because she remembers these kinds of things, and I don't remember when it was. But
I
we are
believe it was the
back to
last bishop's election, Pastor Jay.
last bishop's election. All right, so we are back to red and green cards this year. Guard your red and green cards with your life if you want to be able to vote. A couple notes on how things will go at the assembly. When we after we introduce and move a resolution, it will need a second unless it came to the assembly from the Synod Council, in which case I believe it does not need a second. We'll confirm that with our parliamentarian before next Friday afternoon. If you wish to speak to a resolution, you will have an opportunity to go to one of the two microphones that will be in the room, but whichever one is closest to you. A note that we do not debate the whereas clauses. We only debate the resolved clauses of a resolution or memorial. According to Robert's Rules of Order, the whereas clauses can be amended only if the resolved clauses are amended. So when you come to to a microphone, introduce yourself, state your name and your congregation or other organization, which is your reason for being at the assembly. I know I'm forgetting one thing, and I will remember it later, and then we'll go on. This is it. If you would like to offer an amendment, you will find on page 6.2, which I've got now this up on the screen. You can use this link, or you can use the QR code and email or otherwise send that, and that will allow us to debate that amendment. With that, any questions about my rambling incoherence before we actually look at resolutions?
I will add just one thing, Jay. Yes, indeed, all those ways, the QR code and the email address, that's going to by far be our best way to do so. If a voting member wishes to come to a table and write that amendment out by hand, there'll be a table in the narthex with forms to do so. That's just going to take us a little longer to get the information to those who need to get it on the screens.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Pastor Laura. All right. We can spend some time looking at resolutions if there are no other questions at this point. Questions or comments? Resolution 25-01 comes from the Synod Council, and we pass a resolution that looks something like this every year. It provides for a 3% increase in the baseline salary, which includes salary and housing allowance for ministers of Word and Sacrament, and then sets different starting points, both of which have been increased for ministers of Word and Service, and these are 3% increases for what was in effect. I know somebody will ask about this at some point, so I'm going to say it now. somebody will say, well, we no longer ordain ministers of word and service who don't have a master's degree, so why do we still list ministers of word and service with a bachelor's degree in this resolution? We do that because we still have some ministers of word and service with bachelor's degrees, but not master's degrees serving in the church. So we need to set a baseline for them also. Any questions or comments about this resolution before we go on? I'm going to take that as a no. 25.02. 25.02 confused me when we first got it. The first four words are support of gun violence, and I was confused by that. I went back to my law school days where my administrative law professor, whenever you gave the wrong answer, would say, "Read on." So I read on, and it got to prevention. This came to us from Sean Lowell and several other folks from Riverside, either at Trinity Riverside or at Eden Riverside. And as you can see, the resolutions here are encouraging our bishop to convene an educational event about extreme risk protection laws. Encouraging congregations to engage in conversations about the impact of gun violence and look at possibilities for prevention, and instructing the bishop of the synod to communicate with our appropriate representatives in the U.S. House and Senate regarding gun violence issues. And boy, look at all those signatures. Any questions or comments about this resolution? I will continue to take that as a no, and then I just need to find number 3. Here we go. Item number 3 addresses separately from 25-01 issues related to compensation of ministers of word and service. Proposes that the guidelines for both word and service and word and sacrament ministers be carried out in accordance with the clergy salary range worksheet, which is on the Synod website, which, if I understand the intent of this correctly, it's that salary range worksheet would replace the chart that is currently on the Synod website for ministers of word and service. Any questions or comments about that? Right. And now we have 2504 regarding missing and murdered Indigenous women. This came to us from Pastor Manuel Redamosa, and I didn't see your name, Pastor, but I saw your face. Would you like to share with us about this memorial? And this is a memorial encouraging the church-wide assembly to take certain actions. And with that, could you give us your thoughts on this, Pastor?
Yeah, this is a memorial that through our native group, including the Task Force for Repudiation of the Doctrine of Discovery, put together. This one started. There's this one and the boarding school one, and both of them have their They were kind of born out of synods in Minneapolis. And so there are several synods in our church that'll bringing these memorials forward or something similar. I've noticed that some of the editing that we require for our synod is different than some of the other synods. But so we made some modifications with Jay's help for some clarification for our synod assembly. So for both of these memorials. So. And I'm wearing red today because it is MMIW week, and our church will be wearing red this weekend. So
I realize I hadn't scrolled that down. Thank you.
mhm.
Thank you, Jeff and Terry, for alerting me to that. Now all I need to do is figure out how to close this window in which you alerted me.
There should be an X in the upper right corner of the chat box.
No, I don't have one there. I don't know why.
Jay, just hit escape if you need to.
Yeah, I'll try that. Well, now I've broken it. Okay. Okay. Can you see all of this document?
Most of it. Yep.
Most of it, okay. Okay, so Pastor, thank you. Thank you for that. Any particular comments you'd like to make about either of those memorials?
Nope, all the information's there. It's
Okay.
all about education and so much of this. I mean, we do know that many, if not all of the indigenous women and the violence that takes place on reservations, in particular by white men from outside of the reservations, these murders and the violence gets swept under the rug, or not even swept, it's just disappeared. So that's kind of the imperative for this resolution, to educate our own church. And if I can speak to the next memorial as well, for the boarding school. And this is, really more important now than when it was first written months ago, following the new administration and their work. So thankfully, the ELCA hands are not clean, but we have had some boarding schools in the past that were federally funded, just a couple. But there are many other denominations that had federally funded boarding schools. The violence, the separation from families, the children, the lack of, and the taking away of our language and culture through those boarding schools. This is all, I mean, for many people, this is new information because our government and education system likes to bury the negative of what's transpired on this continent since colonization. And unfortunately, when we bury stuff like this, it does allow us to repeat it, which is what we've seen in recent history and in relevant times, even now, as families are separated. We are doing it again to our brown brothers and sisters. So
Thank you. Thank you,
mhm.
Pastor, for bringing these to us. And while you submitted these, they technically also are coming from the Synod Council.
Yes, because I brought them in late.
Right. So we had to do that to get them in the book and on the agenda.
Yep.
So
Thank you, Jay.
thanks for working hard to get that done. We have, okay, any questions about either of those resolutions? No, all right. I'll scroll down again. Thank you for reminding me. We have caring for our immigrant neighbors, 25-06. And this is This is also a memorial. You might see in the first resolve clause, it says that the Pacifica Synod Assembly memorialize the 2025 churchwide assembly. And that word memorialize shows up again. This is inviting the churchwide assembly to take certain actions related to immigration issues. And this one also came through the Synod Council. Vice President Jeff or Pastor Laura, do you have any particular comments you'd like to make on this?
I would be happy to speak about this one.
Great, thank you.
This did come through the Synod Council. Immigration has been in the news quite a bit lately, and we are a border synod. We share a border, our synod is along the southern border with Mexico. And so this resolution or memorial asks the churchwide assembly, or more specifically, actually asks the congregations of the ELCA and the churchwide assembly to focus on this issue. It's designed to bring focus and attention to the issue of immigration. Pastor Laura, do you have anything you'd like to say on it?
Certainly, I would be happy to just second everything that Jeff has just said. As Jeff and I really worked on the languaging of this, and for me, it was, as the person who's chairing this assembly, it just felt to me that if we in the Pacifica Synod do not speak to issues of immigration to the churchwide in this day, we have a lot to say. We feel it very dramatically and very immediately, and we're doing a lot of work in this area. So I'm just pleased that the Synod Council was able to do this. I would love to have this voice at churchwide, and if it passes, that's where that voice will go.
Great.
I guess we should point out that the churchwide assembly will be this year in August.
Yes. These resolutions, hot off the press, will be going immediately to churchwide as soon as they are approved, or I suppose not if they're not approved, but they'll be directly to the churchwide, which has its own memorials committee, which will review these documents as well before they hit the floor of the churchwide assembly.
Yeah, so just a plug for the resolutions committee. There are 3 of us now. It would be great if there were more of us. If you have bothered to be here today, you're probably actually interested in topics related to resolutions, and that might make you a good candidate for serving on the resolutions committee. One of the things that we do, especially with memorials, we work very hard at getting them into shape where we believe that the memorials committee for the churchwide assembly will be interested in moving this along. So we try to protect those, or actually the technical term is perfect them. Although I'm far from perfect, and if my wife were still alive, she could have told you that. But we try to perfect them, put them into a form where they will be acceptable to churchwide, and that's really valuable work. We'd love to have some more folks join us with that. And with that, we get to 7, 8, 9, and 10. All of these also came from the Synod Council, but they came through the Synod Council based on ideas that were generated at last year's regional gatherings. Last year we had these regional gatherings where people were encouraged to brainstorm together, and these last 4 resolutions, 25, 7, 8, 9, and 10, reflect ideas that were generated at those regional meetings. 25-07 encourages us to, for example, support team ministries and candidates and rostered leaders, to prioritize training and support of lay leaders in our congregations. And we actually have Synod resources to support that. That we network to share ideas, resources, and leadership with congregations across the Synod, and find a variety of ways to share resources. And then we urge our congregations. You can't tell congregations what to do, but you can urge them to do something, which here is work toward joint ministries among congregations that are geographically close to each other, both in terms of their what we might call internal ministries and their ministries in their neighborhoods, serving the needs in those ministries. Any questions or comments about that?
Is team itself too limited when we'll likely have other similar groups moving through the process? Right now I'm thinking of our theological education for Indigenous leaders, which we call TEAL. It's similar to team, but it's for Indigenous leaders. We may have a Latin group as well in the future. There's been some talk of that and some potential funding for it. I guess there's no way to change it now, but
Well,
it's something
know,
to think
There
about.
isn't manual, but as someone who was, a part of, Jeff and I took on the responsibility of trying to take what came directly from the regional
Yeah.
gatherings and
Mhm.
place it into these. And I will tell you, and I think Jeff would second it, this was a lot harder than we expected it to be. And I recognize that they are limited, and you're 100% right to bring that up. So I think that would be a worthy and appropriate amendment to this resolution. So we can't change it today, but we can
Yeah.
on the floor, and
Okay.
should. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I will speak to the microphone and make the amendment then.
Yeah.
yes.
Let me offer one
Yes.
thing, Manuel, that you'll probably want to know about this, and maybe actually this might change the way we're thinking of moving forward. There are 10 resolutions at this assembly, which clearly cannot be considered at one assembly. So we're currently considering passing these 4 en bloc. So I think what I would want to
okay.
do is rescind that complete decision and pull this one out of en bloc so that you could make that amendment. And if you see things in any of the other ones, let me know.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and you could certainly bring that amendment on the floor. We can't change what's in the book. You could certainly bring that amendment at that point. All right.
Yeah, just have to pull it out of en bloc to do so.
Thank you both.
25.07, we'll go on to 25.08. Thank you for reminding me to put the next one up on the screen. 25.8 is a call for community in the midst of revision of division. Committing to courageous proclamation of a gospel, calls to community, compassion, and grace. That as a synod, we commit to being peacemakers within and among churches and in the wider community. We live in an incredibly divided society, and our congregations many are just as divided as our society is. And finally calling upon our congregations to be a model of Christian community, to intentionally provide a safe space for discussion and common ground. I love that word, respectful differences of opinion. That's increasingly difficult. So again, thanks to Jeff and Laura for putting this one together, also taking it from ideas that were generated last year. Any questions or comments about 25-08? I'm going to take that as a no. We'll move on to 25.09. And I'll scroll down to the resolved clauses. This is a call to justice, recitals, quote, Micah 6:8, act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. The resolved clauses include committing to speak boldly in areas of justice that confront our culture, calling upon our leaders to advocate for a variety of causes which are named here, and other similar organizations that strive for justice in our synod and the world. Committing to ongoing financial and prayerful support for our border church and Amparo ministries, and standing at the border. And then finally, redoubling our effort to speak boldly to the core values of the Lutheran Church and against Christian nationalism. Any questions or comments here?
Yeah, Pastor Jay, there is one in the chat. Is the Synod familiar with Braver Angels Faith, an organization that promotes civil discourse and stages debates? Their work correlates nicely with this 2508 resolution.
Interesting. That's a good question. I am not, but I of course do not represent all of the Synod. That would be worth looking into, I'm sure. Thank you for that comment. Anything else regarding 25.09? I'm sorry, 0.08, sorry. No, okay.
I have a question about the border church.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to the day of prayer at the border, and I was so moved by the story of that park, the Peace Park that was right at the border in Tijuana.
Mm-hmm.
And lately I've been really concerned that it seems the military has taken over that strip of land between the actual border fence and then the barrier. And so I was wondering if the military also took over the Peace Park, if that's like totally off limits.
So I can speak to this. I will be the pastor at Border Church beginning June 1st. I'll be doing that quarter time and 3/4 time here at St. Andrews. So we have had Border Church at the wall at Whiskey 8, which is a gate. So it's the West 8 gate. It's behind the water treatment plant down there, about 2 miles west of the San Ysidro border crossing. And so we've been worshiping there, and the military has encroached in the contractors on the space that we are on against the wall. They are still allowing us to have we have an easy up there. At one point we had 3 easy ups when there were far more people that were being detained through the walls, and we were feeding them and getting them water and all the essentials. We're down to 1 tent now, and we are prepared for when the Border Patrol or the military tells us we can no longer have that tent there, that we're going to move. We have not had access to the Peace Park or Friendship Park consistently over the last 4 years. It's been very, very intermittent. We get it for a few weeks and then it's gone again. And that has been mostly due to the work on the wall for the wall along that area about 1.5 miles inland from the coast was replaced from an 18-foot wall to a 30-foot wall. And so during that replacement, both during the first of this administration we have now, done under the Biden administration, and now under this current administration, that work has continued. And while they're working on that wall, we're not allowed to be out there. The other issue that we have is that we can't get out there because of flooding with the sewer water and all the runoff from Tijuana and going into the Tijuana River, of which 80+% of a watershed for the Tijuana River is in Mexico. So all that water is coming down in the Tijuana River Valley and polluting it. So that's the other thing with the flooding, we're unable to get up Friendship Park as well. And like today, the reason we can't get up there today is because of the flooding on the road and the path to
Oh.
Friendship Park.
Mhm.
So that's why we have border church in another area on the wall. But the Mexican side has continually had worship there at the wall on the Mexican side through all this work. And if you want to read more, look up Roosevelt Reservation, that federal property that's been stolen, taken from county, city, and private land. So that was probably more than you wanted to hear.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, that was very helpful.
There's a lot.
Yep. Yeah, for those of us who aren't down in San Diego, we really appreciate hearing from the folks who are and are more involved what's happening there. So thank you for that. And we have one more. Prioritizing sources for mental health and spirituality 25-10. Resolved that the Synod prioritize and uplift resources and events for mental health and spirituality. Call upon congregations to seek resources and counsel of professionals and experts within their membership and share that around the Synod and in our congregations. And then calling upon the Synod to help congregations coordinate their efforts and share activities to address the mental health needs. This is back to the idea of working together and being resources for each other. Any questions about 25-10? Comments?
I just have a comment, not necessarily on this one, but in general. I would like to echo something that Pastor Jay said earlier. We have these resolutions, and when you look at it, it's kind of a strangely organized, strangely worded document on a piece of paper. What the resolutions committee does in perfecting these is not about the documents. And in fact, the resolutions themselves are usually not about the documents. What we're actually doing here is fostering conversation around important issues. And this is the vehicle for doing that. So if you would be interested in being in the resolutions committee, what that committee actually does is foster conversation, foster discernment of what God is calling us to do and trying to turn that into action. So if you are interested in doing that, I would certainly urge you to contact Pastor Jay, and we'll get you hooked up.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Yeah, this is important work, and in the end, you're right. The resolutions in and of themselves comply with a weird set of rules about how they have to be drafted, and don't mean anything if we don't talk about them, enact them, and then behave differently because of the resolutions. But they do give us a way to get the conversation going, which is really important. So thank you for that.
Pastor Jay, on the
Yeah.
subject of weird rules, I would suggest, given what Pastor Manuel would like to do to appropriately amend 2507, that we put 2508, 9, and 10 on block
Yes,
and leave that one open for that amendment.
I think that's a good idea.
Thank you, Laura.
That will save us 4 or 5 minutes during the assembly. So thank you for that. That's a great idea. Okay, so thank you all. Really appreciate your time. Love that people are interested in these things. It's an important process, and thank you all for participating. Again, thanks to Jeff and Pastor Laura, and thanks to Terry for organizing this. Appreciate all of your good work. Anything else before we go? In that case, go in peace, serve the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God.
All right. Thank
See
you.
you all Friday.